there's a lot of things to prepare for college. And so prepping for college really should be happening their sophomore, junior, and senior years. And I know that seems really early, but it will really help the student develop the skills that they need in order to be successful in college. One of those things is to develop an understanding of their disability. One of the ways you can do that is have the students lead their own IEPs. Have students kind of lead those talks and what they need with those instructors. They can also talk to their teachers about their accommodations. That would be really helpful. So they learn to talk to somebody who is, in a position of power about what they need, and they learn to advocate for themselves, and they also learn how to communicate and feel comfortable in asking for what they need. Those are things that are really helpful. Knowing what their barriers are and what they experience in class is really important. I find that most students that I meet with and talk with to determine what best accommodation is, what the best tech solution is, they really don't have a good understanding of what their disability is and what they really need. Because in the past, they've really just been given things and just told what to do, and they've just done it. They haven't really thought about why they're doing things. So developing that self-advocacy skills, understanding of their accommodations, and an understanding of their IEPs is really important. It's really important too to have like the resource teachers and the parents help the student develop the language and the skill around advocating for themselves. So actually spend some time. I actually do a lot of role play with students. Like what would it look like if I was your professor and you were asking me about your note-taking accommodations and how to set those up, or how to set up your testing accommodations. I think those are things that are really important to do. The other thing is you could start, instead of giving like note-taking skills, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit on the next slide, but you could start incorporating some of the tools and the tech that they're going to see in college, and having them, use those tools by themselves and independently. That's really important as well. So the other thing that's important is making sure that they develop like orientation and mobility skills that they need in order to navigate a large campus like this. So becoming more independent and kind of learning the difference between higher ed and K-12, and starting and having those conversations now as early as possible will help the student kind of naturally transition into the college setting. Having students be more involved in making their own healthcare decisions, and maybe even being the primary decision maker in that is really important. So oftentimes students come to college and they've never really handled their own healthcare before. And so when they get here, it's so overwhelming just being a freshman in college. When you add their disability services on top of that, that is just a whole nother area of being overwhelmed, and just so much that student has to do. So being able to navigate those things on their own and really thinking about them and really knowing themselves and how to communicate their needs is really important. And those are skills you can start when they're younger in school. Also, having them get in touch with the DVR and apply for support and technology. So students obtaining their own equipment before they leave college is so important, and to get them to learn how to use that equipment before they get to college. So not waiting until their senior year to get them that laptop that they need, because maybe they've been on loan, they've been using a loaned one from the school the last 4 years, getting them their own laptop or getting them their own tools or their own devices, maybe their own smart pen that they need to use in order to take notes, and having them practice with those, their junior and senior year, so they know how to use that technology before they get to college. And the DVR can help support purchase those items for students. And they can also help support teaching them how to use that technology. So additional skills that every student needs to know, we're actually running into this has nothing, like not just students with disabilities, but across the board, students are not coming prepared for college. This is something that faculty have been sharing with us for years. I mean, not just us as disability service providers, but just everybody across the board. All students are not coming to school prepared for college. And so things that students really need to do is build their note-taking skills. And students with disabilities can do that by learning how to use technology independently. So taking notes independently on their own with some kind of technology. And Glean is one of those things. Glean is expensive. You can do a free trial. OneNote is something that is free. It is a part of the Microsoft Office suite, and it is something that a student will likely use when they go off and work in a some kind of private or public setting in their professional careers, because it is a free app that's part of the Office suite. And if they can, start using that now and develop those skills, then they will be able to then use those in college, and then they can go on and use those after college in their professional career. So it's a tool that they can have access to during, for many years and really develop those skills. The other thing that most colleges are using things like smart pens. There is an Echo 2 smart pen that just came out. We use the Echo Smart Pen here. It really is the best handwriting tool. If you want to use like pen and paper, it allows you to record and take notes at the same time. That is a great note-taking tool. It's really not that expensive, but you do have to buy notebooks for it to work properly. They have special notebooks that go with it. And then there's also, most students in school are in one-to-one schools where they're one-to-one devices. And a lot of schools use iPads with an app called Notability. And I know that most schools do not allow you to record in class, but Notability has a recording feature. And that is something that we give as an accommodation because it allows the student to take notes and record at the same time. In fact, Glean, OneNote, and Notability all allow the student to record and take notes. And what it does is while it's recording, it's syncing to your handwriting or your typing, whichever you're doing. And it really makes a huge difference for those students that just are processing and need to keep up. So that's one way that you can use tools to make sure that a student has access to the notes, but yet they're building those note-taking skills, and they're also able to have control over their notes, and they're not depending on somebody else who is giving them a copy of their notes that they then have to decipher. Reading skills is something else that is a huge deficit. Students are coming to school in college and they just cannot handle the reading load. They don't know how to parse out what is important to read, what can they skim through, what do they have to read all of. And so those reading skills are just really lacking. And so any student who needs to use a reading tool, they really need to know how to independently use that reading tool and also get some strategies where they can manage the reading load. Because that's something that we're finding across the board. Students cannot manage the reading load of college. There's just so much reading that needs to be done, and they're having a hard time figuring out what to read, what's kind of what things are really important to look at, and they just become overwhelmed with so much reading. The other thing is testing. Testing strategies, and if they're going to use any kind of technology when they take a test, they really need to be able to take that test independently with that tech. So it all comes down to making sure that the student is independent while using any of the tools that they usually use or that they're accustomed to be using. So they're not learning how to do that by the time they get to college. Same thing with like a screen magnifier, a screen reader, or even a Braille display. They really need to know how to use those things independently before they come to college. The other things that are really important is developing and organizing calendars. They need to have that skill of how to organize a calendar and how to develop strategies to to actually stay organized that work with them. Maybe it's color coding, maybe it's just blocking off time to get things done, just simple things like that. Students are not coming in with those skills. Also, a way to like schedule, the emails that the students get in college is astronomical. They are just inundated with emails from the university and then all of these little individual departments at the university. And so helping the student figure out a system to check and organize their email is vital to any college student. And so that is something that as resource teachers, we could really work with students on and kind of help them organize a way to clear out their box, put things in folders, or teach them how to create a rule where if something comes in with this heading, it goes into this folder and I can look at it later. So they're not overwhelmed with the 50 or 60 emails that they have in their inbox. That's really important. So I don't know, Stacy, did that help answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much. And I also want to acknowledge earlier in the chat, Mike Hipple said, I love when things work out this way. This week is National Think College Awareness Week. And he advises, please check on the Wisconsin Council of Exceptional Children Facebook to learn more about Think College programs that we have in the state. And if you're a teacher, please consider joining. And then he also included, if you know which tools would be available to them, please consider changing to what they will have, which is a great point. So Mike, thank you for that contribution. Just wanted to point that out from the chat.
Thank you. Yep, so tips for transitioning to college. There's a lot of things that you really need to, students with disabilities and really all students, they really need to be looking at the college and they need to be kind of interviewing the college, looking at what the college has to offer them before they decide. And I know, students really just have this idea of where they want to go to college and they just really want to go to that school, but that school might not have all the resources and the ability to provide the accommodations, or might not be a great campus for that student and what they need. So really need to spend time. Students need to start really early. They need to start, their junior year, maybe even earlier than that, kind of slowly researching universities and figuring out what they have. One of the first things that they need to do is get their documentation ready. So making sure that they have they have located all of the current copies of all of their documentation. They've collected contact information for their doctors. Those are things that are going to be really important as they move through the steps to get accommodations once they've decided on a school. So then researching and touring Disability Services Office is really important. I know a lot of people can't get to all of the schools that they might be interested in, but now with all the virtual settings, reaching out and contacting that school and finding out where their disability service office is and contacting them and asking them for a meeting to talk about what kind of accommodations they offer. Some disability services offices provide prospective student meeting sessions. So that would be great if you could pop into one of those. And most people offer virtual things now. So you can call, you don't have to actually physically go there. It's also really important to get online and look at their website and see what accommodations they provide. Each disability service office will offer different types of accommodations. So for example, here in the UW system, here at Madison, we have a whole toolkit that we meet with the student and we determine which accommodation is the most appropriate accommodation for the student. So we have options. Where some of the other UW schools, they don't have that. They maybe just offer Glean. That would be one of the only things that they offer. And a lot of it comes down to funding. It comes down to how many students they provide accommodations for, like how big is their office. Right now, UW-Madison, we have almost 5,000 students affiliated with our office. So we have a bigger scale. So we're sometimes able to offer more. So it kind of depends on the disability service office and the school. So those things are important to look at. Also researching campus and community resources. So you want to think about like what you might need for housing accommodations. A lot of times students don't think about housing accommodations until it's way far down the line, and then they realize that they're maybe in a school where housing accommodations are not going to be appropriate for them. So looking at that, also looking at if they use a mobility device, making sure that it's appropriate for campus. So maybe if they need a power device rather than a non-power device because they have to travel long distances, or maybe the terrain is more varied or more hilly where that campus is located. So looking at things like that is really important. Also, applying for scholarships or looking for scholarships. A lot of schools will provide or offer scholarships for students with disabilities. So looking into those things, what schools offer what scholarships for students with disabilities? Because those kind of things can help with purchasing maybe some adaptive technology that they need. Something else that's really important is to visit if they kind of narrow down and they really know that they're deciding between a few campuses. It's really important to spend some time on the campus, independently of that hour campus tour that most campuses give. You're not really going to see everything in that hour tour and get a good idea of how big the campus is, how you could navigate the campus. So really looking at that is important. Also, maybe visiting some of the college buildings and the classrooms, so then you kind of get an idea of what you may need in that classroom setting for an accommodation, and think about how like the size and the location of the college versus what it looks like at high school, and kind of helping those students think about the difference between the two and really what kind of impact and access they're going to need for accommodations. Google Maps is a great tool for students to use to also estimate the distance between travel time. I think a lot of times students don't think about the distance that they have to travel between classes or their dorms, and then also kind of schedule in food and eating. Those are things that they don't always think about. So kind of figuring out where campus housing is, where they might take most of their classes, and also ride local transportation when they visit a campus. Don't just go on that hour tour. Also figure out a way how you can ride the local transportation so the student knows how to do that while they're here and see what that's like. I cannot stress how, if it's possible at all, how important it is for a student to not have their first opportunity on campus be move-in day. And it really doesn't matter who the student is. It's so important to be on campus and kind of learn more about campus before move-in day, so that way they know how to navigate campus. Contacting the Disability Service Office early and getting connected with them is really, really one of the most important things you can do to transition to college. Once you have decided what college you're going to, you need to apply or follow the process for applying for accommodations for that school. It is never too early to start setting up accommodations. If you have been accepted into a school, go ahead and start that process for applying for accommodations. And then if you decide, change your mind and you go to a different school, it's no big deal. They can kind of move you off the list, but at least you started that process. Check for, you also want to check all of your personal and school emails through the summer as you're transitioning to college, because a lot of information is going to be coming in through there, and really being able to navigate that and figure out what you have to do, when timelines are, those kinds of things are real important. You also want to follow those standard deadlines, especially housing, unless you've been told otherwise. Housing is something that's very complicated on campuses. So if you do have a housing accommodation, you need to make sure that you are following those deadlines that the school is giving you, unless the Disability Service Office has told you directly otherwise. And then also just, you want to attend all orientations and read through resources, but try to start those kinds of things early. And I know sometimes students get through high school and they're just kind of like, they're done and they need a break. But the earlier you start kind of moving through these things, it's much easier. So you're not doing everything at once. It is really overwhelming going to college for students. And when you add all of the transition to college in regards to disability on top of that, it just becomes kind of astronomical, everything that they have to do, and it really becomes overwhelming. So starting early, trying not to do everything at once, and just one thing a little bit at a time. And then again, if you know what school you're going to, and you know the kind of technology that they're going to offer you, then start using that early so you learn how to use it before you get to campus. And then I just have some additional resources if you're interested. The ADA, the law for ADA, and then also the Disability Service Center here at the on campus. There's our link, and then how to apply for accommodations. So you can kind of see what it looks like on our end, how you can apply for accommodations, but that doesn't mean that every school will look that way, but it'll kind of give you an idea of what that looks like.